November 14th, 1957. Approximately 12:40 in the afternoon. McFall Road, Apalachin, New York. A dirt road running half a mile south from Main Street through farmland and timber, ending at a hilltop estate that belongs to a man named Joseph Barbara. The road is a dead end. A bridge is out. There is one way in and one way out. Sergeant Edgar Croswell of the New York State Police is driving. His partner, investigator Vincent Vasisco, sits beside him. But in the back seat are two Treasury agents from the Bureau of Alcohol and Tobacco Tax, Arthur Rustin and Kenneth Brown. They are in a single unmarked car. They carry no warrant. They have no backup. They don't know what they're driving into. The car crests the hill, and the estate opens up below them. More than 30 automobiles fill the parking area in front of a 4-car garage and spill into an adjoining pasture. Cadillacs, Chrysler Imperials, Lincolns, mostly black. Carrying plates from New York, New Jersey, Ohio, California, Florida, Illinois, Texas, Colorado. The strong smell of meat cooking over an open flame drifts from a fieldstone barbecue pit at the edge of the property. Dozens of men stand around the pit and across the grounds in expensive suits, silk shirts, white fedoras, gleaming shoes. One observer will later describe the scene as a meeting of George Rafts. Croswell pulls the car near the garage and the 4 men begin writing down license plate numbers. A group of attendees rounds the corner of the building, sees them, and stops dead. For a moment, nobody moves. Then one of the men shouts something, and the group retreats toward the house at a trot. Josephine Barbara, the host's wife, spots the officers from inside and raises the alarm. Croswell doesn't have the manpower to approach the house. He doesn't need to. He has something better: geography. McFall Road is a dead end, and he's standing between the estate and the only exit. At approximately 12:50, he orders a roadblock at the bottom of the hill. Vasisco races for reinforcements. Croswell and one Treasury agent hold the road alone. Every person on that hilltop, bosses, underbosses, consiglieri, capo regimes from every major mafia family in the United States, has exactly one way off the property, and 2 men are blocking it. Most people know what Apalachin was: a meeting, a raid, a bunch of gangsters caught at a barbecue. What almost nobody understands is why the most secretive criminal organization in America gathered its entire national leadership in a single location on a dead-end road with no security, no lookouts, and no escape plan. Why the FBI's director had publicly denied the Mafia's existence for 3 decades while it operated across every major American city. And why the men who had the most to gain from this meeting's failure were the ones who didn't show up. The famous version of Apalachin is a raid. The real version is an autopsy of an organization that destroyed its greatest asset in a single afternoon and started a chain of consequences that wouldn't finish for 30 years. Before Apalachin, the American Mafia's most valuable possession wasn't its money, its soldiers, or its political connections. It was something far more powerful and far more fragile: the official position of the United States government that the Mafia didn't exist. For 3 decades, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover had maintained this fiction with the full weight of the Bureau behind it. "There's no organized crime in America," he declared. There was no such entity as the Mafia. The resource allocation told the real story. In the FBI's New York field office, the city where all 5 major crime families operated, where the commission held its seat, where billions of dollars in criminal revenue flowed through unions, docks, construction sites, and casinos, 400 special agents hunted communist subversives. 4 investigated organized crime. Hoover had accumulated files on 25 million people, overwhelmingly suspected leftists. His campaign had been so effective that Communist Party USA membership had dropped below 10,000, of whom roughly 1,500 were FBI informants. A Justice Department prosecutor joked that Hoover's agents were nearly the only ones paying party dues. The consequences of this institutional blindness were precise and measurable. When the FBI checked the names Croswell collected at Apalachin, they discovered they already had files on 53 of the roughly 60 identified mobsters. Yet, no coordinated investigation existed. No analyst had connected the names. No field office had been directed to treat them as parts of a single organization. Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter had a personal file card at the Bureau, but not Brooklyn crime boss Joe Bonanno. Left-wing activist Carlo Tresca had a file, but not the gangster widely believed to have killed him, Carmine Galante. This was the environment the American Mafia had operated in since Prohibition, an organization that controlled the waterfront, the garment district, construction, gambling, loan sharking, and narcotics trafficking across every major American city, functioning in full view of a federal law enforcement apparatus that had decided, as a matter of policy, to look the other way. The invisibility wasn't earned through operational genius. It was gifted by institutional failure. The year that ended at Apalachin had started with blood. On the evening of May 2nd, 1957, Frank Costello, the man they called the Prime Minister of the Underworld, and the boss of what would become the Genovese family, stepped into the lobby of the majestic apartments at 115 Central Park West in Manhattan. A heavyset man in a fedora was waiting behind a pillar. The man was Vincent Gigante, a former professional boxer with 25 fights on his record, sent by Vito Genovese. Gigante stepped out and called across the lobby. "This is for you, Frank." The warning was a mistake. Costello turned his head at the sound, and the bullet that should have entered his skull grazed his scalp instead. He staggered, but survived. While Costello was hospitalized, detectives found a slip of paper in his jacket pocket with a handwritten notation: gross casino wins of $426.57, $651,284. The figure matched exactly the Tropicana Hotel's gambling receipts in Las Vegas. The mob's casino skim, one of its most closely guarded revenue streams. Jean was suddenly on a police evidence log because a hitman couldn't keep his mouth shut. Costello got the message. He retired, ceding the family to Genovese. 6 weeks later, on June 17, Anastasia's underboss, Frank Scalise, was gunned down at a fruit stand on Arthur Avenue in the Bronx. Scalise had been selling memberships in the family at $50,000 apiece, a practice that risked infiltration and violated the commission's rules on induction. His brother Joseph demanded answers, but Joseph disappeared within months. Then came the main event. On the morning of October 25, 1957, Albert Anastasia, the Lord High Executioner, boss of what would become the Gambino family, the man who had run Murder Incorporated, walked into Grasso's barber shop inside the Park Sheraton Hotel at 877th Avenue in Manhattan. His bodyguard, Anthony Coppola, dropped him off at the door and took a walk. Anastasia settled into barber chair number 4, hot towels draped over his face. 2 gunmen in aviator sunglasses, fedoras, and scarves walked in, pushed the barber aside, and opened fire. Between 5 and 10 shots. In the most iconic detail in the history of American organized crime, the dying Anastasia didn't collapse. He lunged forward, not at his killers, but at their reflections in the barbershop mirror. He shattered the glass and fell to the tile floor beneath it. The murder has never been officially solved. The most widely credited theory attributes the hit to a crew including Crazy Joe Gallo, who later boasted to anyone who'd listen, "You can just call the five of us the barbershop quintet." The assassination was a joint operation. Genovese wanted Costello's most dangerous ally eliminated. Carlo Gambino, quiet, patient, and far more dangerous than he appeared, wanted the boss's chair. Meyer Lansky and Santo Traficante Jr., furious that Anastasia had tried to muscle into their Havana casino operations, provided support. The justifications presented to the commission were numerous. Anastasia's ordering of the Arnold Schuster murder in 1952, a civilian killed for helping catch bank robber Willie Sutton, the Scalise membership scandal, the Cuban casino interference, the increasingly erratic violence. The vote was unanimous. 3 bosses were removed, retired, or dead in 5 months. The Mafia's national structure was in disarray. Genovese, who'd engineered most of the chaos, now needed a national meeting to consolidate his position, to be recognized as the most powerful boss in America, to ratify Gambino as head of the former Anastasia family, to divide Anastasia's operations, to settle the narcotics question in light of the draconian Narcotics Control Act of 1956. He needed the commission to sit down, face to face, and formally acknowledge the new order. But he needed a location. The estate at 625 McFall Road, Apalachin, had served this purpose before. Joseph Barbara had hosted a smaller commission meeting there in October of 1956, a session that added Philadelphia boss Angelo Bruno and Detroit's Joseph Zerilli to the governing body. That meeting had gone smoothly, or nearly so. The only complication was a traffic stop on the road out. A state trooper had pulled over Carmine Galante, no license. Jant an extensive criminal record, nearly $2,000 in cash. What happened afterward should have been a warning. 2 police officers from West New York, New Jersey, Captain Chris Gleitzman and Sergeant Peter Policastro, drove to Binghamton and offered the investigating trooper a $1,000 bribe to release Galante. The trooper was Edgar Croswell. He refused. He had both officers arrested. Croswell had been watching Barbara for almost 13 years, and he'd first encountered him in 1944 and had tracked his activities ever since. The suspected murders in Pennsylvania, the Thompson submachine gun found in his car, the criminal cases that mysteriously collapsed. Barbara ran a Canada Dry bottling franchise and controlled the beer and soft drink distribution in the Binghamton area. He'd built himself into the community so thoroughly that when he applied for a handgun permit, the police chief of Endicott served as his character reference. Within the Mafia, Barbara served as the boss of the southern New York tier territory under the Buffalo family, with Russell Bufalino as his closest ally. Barbara understood the risk. After the Galante incident, he warned Stefano Magaddino, the Buffalo boss who controlled the territory, that Croswell was a problem, that the trooper disliked him and would be watching. Magaddino dismissed it. The arrangements were made. The invitations went out. And Barbara, who'd suffered a serious heart attack in 1956 and was already in declining health, began preparing to host the most important gathering of his criminal career. 1 week before the meeting, Barbara placed an order with Armour & Company in Binghamton. $432 worth of prime steaks, veal chops, and hams. A 220-pound shipment specially sent from Chicago. But he had 200 pounds of steak in his walk-in cooler. His property caretaker, Mel Blossom, would wheel the meat to the Fieldstone barbecue pit the morning of the meeting. The guests would eat charcoaled steaks, drink fine wines, and smoke Cuban cigars. The estate itself was built for exactly this kind of gathering. an 11-room fieldstone manor with a pine-paneled great room measuring 32 by 52 feet, a massive stone fireplace, a 4-car garage with its own bar and kitchen, a swimming pool, a 2-acre pond, a 12-horse stable, and a parking area large enough for dozens of cars with overflow into the adjacent field. If you're still here for this one, a subscribe would mean a lot, because the preparations were perfect, the security was non-existent. On the afternoon of Wednesday, November 13, the day before the meeting, the Parkway Motel at 900 Vestal Parkway East received a call about a bad check. The motel sat just a few hundred yards from the state police substation where Croswell was stationed. He and Vasisco drove over to investigate. While speaking with the proprietor's wife, Helen Schroeder, Croswell noticed a young man he recognized pulling up in a Cadillac. Joseph Barber Jr. was 21 years old. He walked in and reserved rooms, 3 doubles for 2 nights, explaining they were for a convention of Canada Dry Men. He wouldn't provide guest names or arrival times. Then he paid a deposit, took the keys, and left. When the motel staff pressed for details, he said, "Don't worry, Joe Barber will take care of things." That evening, Croswell and Vasisco drove down McFall Road to the estate. They found 4 automobiles already parked. One belonging to Patsy Turigiano, a known Barber associate with a criminal record dating to 1928, and 3 others carrying New Jersey, Ohio, and New York plates. Back at the Parkway Motel, they found an Ohio-plated Cadillac. Its occupants, John DeMarco and John Scalish from Cleveland, had taken a room but refused to sign the registration card. Later that night, Croswell identified a Lincoln belonging to James LaDuca of the Magadino family. He called the 2 Treasury agents. He called his superior, Inspector Robert Denman. Everyone agreed. They'd go back in the morning and see what was happening. The trigger sequence was mechanical, but each link connected to the next with the inevitability of a lock turning. A bad check at a motel. A young man who couldn't keep his mouth shut. License plates that didn't belong in Tioga County. A sergeant who'd been waiting 13 years for something exactly like this. By the time Croswell and the 3 agents drove up McFall Road at 12:40 on November 14th, the meeting had been underway since that morning. What they found, the 30-plus cars, the smoke from the barbecue, the men in silk suits, has already been described. What followed was organizational collapse rendered as physical comedy. The first vehicle to reach the roadblock was a small truck driven by Bartolo Guccia, a 66-year-old fish merchant from Endicott with an arrest record dating to 1916 that included murder. He claimed he was making a delivery. Croswell waved him through, then radioed ahead. A patrol car stopped Guccia farther down the road. But before he was stopped, Guccia had reversed back up the hill to warn the others. The second car carried the meeting's most important figures, Russell Bufalino at the wheel of a 1957 Chrysler Imperial, Vito Genovese in the front passenger seat, Joseph Ida, Gerardo Catena, and Dominic Oliveto in the back. They had the presence of mind to drive calmly. They told the troopers they'd simply dropped by to visit their friend Joe, who'd been feeling ill. Then the exodus began. Approximately 20 state troopers from barracks at Binghamton, Whitney Point, Waverly, and Horseheads converged on the area, their Plymouth cruisers arriving with lights flashing and sirens screaming. And the bosses of the American Mafia, men who controlled billions in criminal revenue, who decided who lived and who died across the entire country, ran. They ran through open fields, they climbed over fences, they crashed through underbrush in camels' hair coats and alligator shoes. They headed west toward Apalachin Creek, through timber and farmland that offered no cover for men dressed for a banquet. Trooper Vasisco captured the absurdity perfectly. All the police cars had to do was patrol the roads, he said. They had to come out sooner or later. You see a guy in a silk suit and a white fedora, you say. He doesn't belong in the woods. Joseph Bonanno, boss of the Bonanno family, chairman of the commission, the most powerful organized crime figure in America, was found in a cornfield. He later claimed someone else happened to have his driver's license. Santo Traficante Jr., Tampa's boss, emerged from the tree line, spotted a state police car, turned and ran. Troopers fired warning shots. He surrendered. John Montana, a Buffalo City councilman who'd been nominated for Businessman of the Year and was actually a Magadino family capo regime, was found wandering lost in the woods. His explanation was a small masterpiece of desperation. His Cadillac's brakes had failed in Ithaca. He'd stopped at Barbara's for help, was having a quiet cup of tea with Joe's wife when some commotion started, went for a walk, and got lost. James LaDuca, Magadino's son-in-law, was caught in the woods and told troopers he'd been chasing a deer. Carmine Lombardozzi, a Gambino capo regime, said he'd come to go hunting. When asked why he carried no gun or gear, but he said he was planning to buy it there. Rain began at approximately 2:30. Men emerged from the woods bedraggled, soaking wet and exhausted. Suits muddied and torn, shoes ruined, burrs clinging to silk. Joseph Valachi, who would later become the most famous informant in Mafia history, described the humiliation years afterward. If soldiers got arrested in a meet like that, he said, you can imagine what the bosses would have done. There they are, running through the woods like rabbits, throwing away money so they won't be caught with a lot of cash, and some of them throwing away guns. Locals claim that months later, they were still picking $100 bills out of the leaves around the estate. The processing continued until 1 in the morning at the State Trooper Building on Vestal Parkway, a 1,500 square foot facility that was never designed to hold 60 detained organized crime figures. One by one, each man was brought into Croswell's office. She ordered to empty his pockets, remove his shoes, and provide identification. The collective haul, more than $300,000 in cash, carried in tight-rolled wads. One man who listed his occupation as unemployed carried close to $10,000. No guns or contraband were found on anyone. The weapons were somewhere in the woods. Of the roughly 63 men identified and detained, 50 had police records, 35 had been convicted of crimes. 23 had served prison time. Collectively, they'd accumulated more than 275 arrests and 100 convictions. All were Italian or of Italian descent. About half were interrelated by blood or marriage. The excuses were almost comically uniform. Virtually every man said he'd heard Joe Barbara was ill and had come to wish him well. On the same day, from California, Texas, Ohio, Florida, Illinois, Colorado, New Jersey, and Montreal. Mere coincidence. Croswell's assessment was dry. We gave them a rough time at the station house, he said, but we couldn't even make them commit disorderly conduct there. He added, these guys are never indignant. The scope of the gathering told the story the attendees wouldn't. The detained men represented virtually every major mafia family in the United States. From New York alone, Genovese himself, with underboss Gerardo Catena and consigliere Michelle Miranda. Carlo Gambino, the new boss of the former Anastasia family, who'd escaped through the woods alongside Paul Castellano, a young capo regime who would one day run the family and be murdered outside a steakhouse for it. Joseph Bonanno, commission chairman, with former underboss Frank Garofalo, who'd come out of semi-retirement in Sicily specifically for this meeting. Joseph Profati with his underboss and second cousin Joseph Magliocco. The Lucchese family sent underboss Stefano Lassalle, consigliere Vincent Rao, and capo regime John Ormento, but boss Tommy Lucchese himself was conspicuously absent. From beyond New York, Sado Trafficante Jr. from Tampa, Joseph Savello from Dallas, Frank De Simone, a practicing lawyer who was also the boss of Los Angeles, alongside underboss Simone Scozzeri, John Scalish from Cleveland, John Sebastian LaRocca and Gabriel Manarino from Pittsburgh, Joseph Ida from Philadelphia, Frank Zito from Springfield, Illinois, Nick Savella and Joe Filardo from Kansas City, Luigi Greco and Giuseppe Cotroni from Montreal, even Giuseppe Setacase from Agrigento, Sicily. Many shared a common origin: Barbara, Bonanno, Garofalo, Bonventre, Canone, the Magadinos, and Guccia all came from Castellammare del Golfo, the same small Sicilian town. The blood ties were dense. Profaci and Magliocco were second cousins. Montana's nephew had married Magadino's daughter. Another Magadino daughter was LaDuca's wife. Zerilli's son had married Profaci's daughter. The men who weren't there mattered more than the men who were. Lucky Luciano, exiled in Italy, the architect of the commission system itself. Frank Costello, claiming surveillance prevented travel. Meyer Lansky, calling in sick from Florida. Tommy Lucchese, saying he hadn't yet arrived. Sam Giancana, the Chicago boss who had objected to holding the meeting in his city, but somehow failed to attend when it moved to New York. All were aligned against Genovese. Their absences form a pattern that's difficult to attribute to coincidence and impossible to prove as conspiracy. Luciano himself and his associate Joseph Stacker later stated flatly that the meeting had been sabotaged, that the men who stayed home knew it would be exposed and wanted it exposed because the resulting chaos would destroy Genovese. The outcome supports the theory with uncomfortable precision. Within 2 years of Apalachin, Gambino, Luciano, Costello, and Lucchese allegedly paid $100,000 to a drug dealer named Nelson Cantalopes to testify that Genovese had personally conspired in narcotics trafficking. On April 17, 1959, Genovese was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. He died at the medical facility in Springfield, Missouri on February 14, 1969, never having tasted freedom again. Before his death, he reportedly told an associate, "I wish I'd broken both my legs before I accepted that invitation." Whether the meeting was deliberately sabotaged remains disputed. Some historians find the circumstantial evidence persuasive. Others point out that the absences can be individually explained. Luciano was in exile, Costello was genuinely under surveillance, Lansky was Jewish and rarely attended commission meetings, Lucchese may simply have been delayed. The truth is that the historical record doesn't resolve the question, and presenting the most dramatic explanation as settled fact would be dishonest. What isn't disputed is the result. The man who called the meeting to prove he controlled the organization was the man the meeting destroyed. Here's the question the sabotage theory really raises. If the most powerful criminal organization in America could be brought down by 4 men in an unmarked car on a dirt road, does that mean it was never as powerful as everyone believed? Or does it mean that organizational arrogance is a more reliable killer than any enemy? Tell me what you think in the comments. The consequences of Apalachin moved with a speed and totality that no one inside the organization had anticipated. Within 4 days, on November 18, 1957, J. Edgar Hoover ordered the dramatic expansion of the top Hoodlum Program. The man who'd spent 3 decades denying the Mafia existed had no choice. The New York Times had run the story on its front page. Every FBI field office in the country was directed to identify the 10 most significant organized crime figures in its territory and target them for investigation. Hoover authorized illegal wiretaps. The implementation was sometimes absurd. The field office in Butte, Montana couldn't find 10 hoodlums in its jurisdiction, so it listed 10 local juvenile delinquents and launched a full investigation of their criminal activities. Headquarters praised Butte for its diligence. But the program worked. Federal agencies began pooling information on more than 1,100 major racketeers for the first time in the Bureau's history. The Mafia's own response was telling. Membership books were closed across every family in the country. No new members would be inducted until 1976, nearly 2 decades of organizational paralysis born from a single afternoon. Robert Kennedy had been serving as chief counsel of the McClellan Committee, the Senate Select Committee on Improper Activities in Labor and Management, when Apalachin hit. The committee heard more than 1,500 witnesses and gathered 14 million words of testimony. Kennedy turned it into a crusade, but he published The Enemy Within in 1960. When his brother reached the White House, he became Attorney General and built the first coordinated federal anti-organized crime infrastructure, linking all 26 federal law enforcement agencies. The numbers tell the story. Organized crime convictions rose by 800%. In the first 6 months of 1963 alone, federal prosecutors secured 171 indictments of racketeering figures, compared with 24 for the same period 3 years earlier. Kennedy testified before Congress that in 1957, more than 100 top racketeers had met at the now infamous crime convention at Apalachin, New York. But until 1960, the federal government had only the barest shreds of evidence about what had happened at that meeting. He added, such a meeting could not occur unobserved today. The next link in the chain was forged inside a prison cell. The top Hoodlum Program's prosecutions had put both Vito Genovese and a low-ranking soldier named Joseph Valachi behind the walls of the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary at the same time. Genovese, paranoid and raging, became convinced that Valachi was an informant. He gave Valachi what Valachi interpreted as the kiss of death. Terrified, Valachi attacked a fellow inmate with a metal pipe, mistaking the man for a hitman. The murder earned him a life sentence and nothing left to lose. He agreed to cooperate. Beginning September 27, 1963, Valachi testified before Senator McClellan's subcommittee in televised hearings, watched by millions of Americans, protected by approximately 200 United States Marshals. He was the first member of the Italian-American Mafia to publicly acknowledge its existence. And he gave it a name, Cosa Nostra, and described its structure: the soldiers, the caporegimes, the families, the commission. He detailed initiation rituals, explained the chain of command, and provided testimony on specific unsolved crimes. The connection to Apalachin was direct and mechanical. The increased pressure from the top Hoodlum program had imprisoned Genovese and Valachi together, creating the conditions under which omertà could break. Kennedy, testifying 2 days before Valachi took the stand, described the picture as ugly, a private government of organized crime with an annual income of billions, resting on a base of human suffering. The chain continued. The revelations catalyzed legislation. The Omnibus Crime Control and Safe Streets Act of 1968 authorized federal wiretapping. The Organized Crime Control Act of 1970 included, as Title IX, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO. But the statute was drafted by G. Robert Blakey, under the supervision of Senator John McClellan, the same man who chaired both the original Rackets Committee and the Valachi hearings. For nearly a decade, prosecutors didn't fully understand what they had. FBI Director William Webster admitted in 1985, "We had RICO for almost 10 years before we knew what to do with it. When they figured it out, they used it to do something no prosecutor had ever attempted: charge the heads of all 5 New York families in a single case." The commission trial, United States versus Anthony Salerno and others, was prosecuted by United States Attorney Rudolph Giuliani, indicted on February 25, 1985, after a 5-year investigation involving more than 200 federal agents and 171 court-approved wiretaps. On November 19, 1986, in all 8 defendants who stood trial were convicted. 7 received 100-year prison sentences. Among those originally indicted was Paul Castellano, the same man who'd attended the Apalachin meeting 28 years earlier as a young capo regime and ran through the woods in his suit. He'd risen to boss of the Gambino family. He never stood trial. On December 16, 1985, Castellano was gunned down outside Sparks Steakhouse in Manhattan, murdered by John Gotti's crew in a power play that was itself a consequence of the prosecutorial pressure Apalachin had set in motion. The structural logic of the entire chain can be distilled into a single contradiction. Call it the visibility paradox. The commission system Luciano designed in 1931 required periodic national meetings to prevent any one boss from accumulating too much power. Then those meetings required visible assembly. Visible assembly was the one thing the organization's survival depended on never doing. The protocol that distributed power also concentrated vulnerability. The system designed to prevent any one man from destroying the organization created the conditions under which any one meeting could destroy it. Apalachin wasn't a failure of the system. It was the system, functioning exactly as designed, producing the outcome it had always been capable of producing. If understanding the mechanical connection between a barbecue in upstate New York and the systematic destruction of the American Mafia's power structure is the kind of thing you came here for, a like tells me to keep going. Joseph Barbara didn't live to see most of it. After Apalachin, everything he'd built collapsed. He was indicted for refusing to testify before a grand jury. He was charged with income tax evasion and fraudulent corporate tax forms. He lost his Canada Dry franchise, the legitimate business that had been his cover for decades. He sold the McFall Road estate in May of 1959 to a builder named LaRue Quick for $50,000 cash and an $80,000 mortgage, a fraction of the $250,000 he'd invested. On June 17, 1959, Barbara died of a heart attack at Wilson Memorial Hospital in Johnson City, New York. He was 53 years old. The estate passed through hands. Quick and a local realtor briefly ran it as a tourist attraction. Visitors paid for guided tours and could buy an Appalachian Joe barbecue for 50 cents. Neighbors protested what they called a shrine of crime, and the town revoked its commercial zoning. The property was sold to a series of owners. Douglas Burt, who ran a department store in Endicott, turned it into a horse farm. His son, Matt, recalled that every owner since the Barbers had left the house exactly as it was. Barbara's daughter visited once and told Matt's sister, "We used to sit here and my father would have card games here." In 2002, the estate went to auction. 1,100 people showed up. Telephone bids came in from California and Florida. 2 unidentified men from New York City bought the property for $300,000. The personal items: Barbara's octagonal oak poker table, a grand piano, bar furniture, the walk-in cooler, sold for another $100,000. The auctioneer wore a black tie featuring Marlon Brando as Don Corleone and told the crowd, "I tried to get one with machine guns on it, but I couldn't." A researcher named Chris Brewster stood at the edge of the property that day and stated what everyone already knew. That was pretty much the end of them having free reign in the country, he said. And it happened right here, in this little town which was mostly farms. This is where the downfall of the Mafia as they knew it happened. Sergeant Edgar Croswell continued in law enforcement, served on the New York State Organized Crime Task Force, and testified before Congress on June 30th, 1958. He died on November 17th, 1990, at 77 years old of emphysema at his home in Johnson City. He's buried at Riverhurst Cemetery in Endicott, Broome County, New York. The Parkway Motel, where it all started, where Croswell spotted Barbara Jr. reserving rooms for the Canada Dry men, still operates at 900 Vestal Parkway East. It's a budget motel now, called the Parkway Inn. The trooper barracks where 60 mobsters were processed through the night stood a few hundred yards away. In Manhattan, the Park Sheraton Hotel where Anastasia was murdered is the Park Central Hotel. Grasso's Barbershop is a Starbucks. The Fieldstone House on McFall Road still stands. The property is about 42 acres now, reduced through parcel sales. It operates as Hidden Farm, a private horseboarding and lesson facility owned by a woman named Susan Deacon. Visitors still show up about once every 2 weeks looking for the driveway. The local librarian confirmed it. People stop by all the time and ask how to get to the location. Deacon would rather close the chapter entirely. There's no historical marker in the hamlet of Apalachin. No plaque, no sign. The barbecue pit Joe Barbara built by hand is somewhere on those 42 acres. Fieldstone, overgrown, quiet. The most famous grill in the history of American organized crime, with nothing left on it, and no one left to come.